This podcast is for educational purposes. Our guests aren't scripted and are free to speak their minds. Therefore, their views and opinions don't necessarily reflect those of BridgeBio Pharma. Also, your doctor is your best source of information about any symptoms you might be experiencing. Please consult a medical care professional about any health questions and concerns. Now, we hope you enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome to On Rare Innovators, a rare disease podcast produced by BridgeBio, a biotech company that works on developing treatments for rare diseases. I'm your host, Mandy Rohrig, a member of the Patient Advocacy team, and as always, I'm joined by my longtime friend and colleague, David Rintell, Head of Patient Advocacy at BridgeBio. Hi, David. Great to see you.
Hi, Mandy. Great to see you. Always a pleasure.
This is our second episode of On Rare Innovators, and as a reminder, the goal of this Innovator series is to really elevate the experiences of leaders in the rare disease community. These are people who think creatively, take action to change and transform how rare disease development occurs. These innovators can be advocacy leaders, business people, researchers, or clinicians. And today, David and I are excited because we are interviewing Nasha Fitter. She epitomizes the definition of what an innovator is. She's a parent, an organizational leader, and the founder of a company that is shaping how data are collected for patients in rare disease communities.
Nasha's life was turned around when her daughter Amara was diagnosed with a very rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorder called FOXG1. Children affected by FOXG1 tend to be non-ambulatory. They don't walk, they don't speak, they have developmental delays, and many of them experience symptoms of autism. And this was the starting point. Nasha took this as a challenge to change the lives for children with FOXG1 and all children living with rare conditions. Nasha, how are you today?
Fabulous.
Nasha, I guess I would really like to start by learning more about who you are as a person. So where does the story really begin for you?
Wow, we're going way back. Okay.
Way back.
Well, I grew up to middle-class parents. Money was a bit of an issue. I was very ambitious as a child. I really wanted to accomplish big things. I've always read a lot of history books and autobiographies and biographies. I was absolutely obsessed with Coco Chanel growing up. Just a phenomenal female entrepreneur. I love that she came from nothing. She was innovative. She changed the way an entire industry operated, and she was fabulous on top of it. So that was kind of who I wanted to be. I grew up in California. I graduated from college at USC and I moved to New York and became an investment banker because at that time, all I wanted was to live in New York, have a fabulous corner office, be on Wall Street. And after a couple of years doing that, I realized that moving money around was not satisfying. I'd read an autobiography about a woman who was one of the co-founders of the Human Rights Watch and had a huge impact on, what was happening in Eastern Europe with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And she was just a normal woman who had gotten involved in a lot of really important things. And I thought, okay, that's actually what I want to do. That's the ambition I want. And so I quit my job and I moved to India and I started working at a nonprofit focused on helping young people and women in different parts of India. My father thought I'd be back in 3 months. He was like, you'll never survive that. I am Indian ethnically, but have grown up in the United States. So I moved to India and began working at a nonprofit and started working in small towns and villages with women, with children, experiencing things and being in conditions that my parents could not believe. But it was a really eye-opening and phenomenal experience for me, one of the best years of my life. And then I ended up starting a company in India. And I did that for a number of years and then finally decided, as many people do when they're confused about what to do next with their life, I went to business school and I was lucky.
Before you go on to business school, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'd really love to hear more about your work in India and to quit our jobs in the investment banking industry. That is a really big change. What was the work like?
Yeah, I haven't talked about this in so long. I worked for a nonprofit at the time called Digital Partners. And it was really special. And our focus was really, how can we use technology to help women and children who are living in villages and small towns make a better income. So in India, most women create a lot of crafts and then they sell those crafts. So we were really working with these women to understand, okay, how do you start creating things in a more scaled approach? How can you partner with people? How can you start a little bank account? How do you create designs that will be more appealing to people who live in cities who will pay more? And it was so funny because, as you know, in cities, we tend to wear really dark colors because I guess we're all very depressed. But in villages in
Yeah.
India, they sew with really bright colors and they put a billion colors together. And in
Yeah.
cities, they kind of look at that as like too kitsch,
Mm.
And so
Oh.
I remember a moment where we were explaining to these women to try to use darker threads, and they said, "But they don't make us happy."
Mhm.
It was just, it's so interesting, so many things like that. I was in one village in Karnataka, and it was a village, basically a community of farmers, and we were helping them
Mhm.
try to understand more of their irrigation and how to make that more efficient. And it was a
Yeah.
village that had been really affected by polio.
Mm.
Now, thanks to Bill Gates, polio is basically eradicated, but it was a huge issue when I was in India. And there was a girl there who had polio, so didn't have legs that were working, and I had gotten really sick when I was there, and I had a bad cold, and I was feeling really annoyed with myself and the world, and I was sitting in this little tent, and she came up to me and she said, "Oh, Didi," which means sister, I brought you some warm milk and some turmeric. By the way, turmeric has been used in India for generations. I know now everyone is like golden milk is like some big, unique phenomenon, but everyone's been drinking turmeric for centuries, by the way. And I remember feeling so embarrassed that I was here feeling sorry for myself. And then there was this little girl who had polio, who really couldn't even walk, like bringing me something to try to make me feel better. There were all these experiences. I mean, just the compassion in so many villages. I spent a lot of time in Maharashtra in a village working with a university on how do we actually, and this is what led me to start my company, on young people, really helping them feel more confident to
Yeah.
apply for
Mhm.
jobs. And this was a time in India where companies were starting to outsource to places like India, where there's a lot of English speakers. And for the average Indian, the salaries that those outsourcing jobs were paying were more than their entire families had ever made, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a life changing experience. But a lot of these young kids in India, English is very classist. So if you have been brought up in more of an upper middle class family, you will learn English and you'll be able to speak it
Uh-huh.
properly. But the kids who needed these jobs the most were the ones who didn't have that access. So
Yeah.
we were working with them in Baramati to help them, feel more confident and speak
Mhm.
English better. And I was just seeing there was just such a drive in these areas. And that's what really led to my company, which was focused on how do you train someone to speak English properly, to intonate, to have confidence in a very short period of time. And English is really foreign compared to Indian languages. So it was really difficult for someone to pick up a language like English. So I ended up writing a book, which I published with Penguin in India. And it's called You're Hired. But it really broke down how to learn a language like English if your brain is used to learning things in a rote
Mm.
way. And so then I started these trainings and did a lot of work there. It was just a phenomenal
Wow.
experience going across the country working with young people and just really understanding the socioeconomic dilemmas.
And Nasha, you had been working at a nonprofit, and then you recognized a need, which is for young people to do this outsourcing work using English. But instead of doing it as a nonprofit, you formed a company. Why was that the best choice at that time?
You know what? One thing I learned in the nonprofit, the people that I worked for, they were really excited about helping me kind of launch a career in that area and working at the United Nations. And I really had a coming of age moment where I said, I just love business. I just love the idea of creating something that has value and having someone pay for that and then making that excellent and having a consumer really excited about that and then reinvesting that. And so that's what I said. I want to create something that's sustainable. I want to create something that I can hire the best people. I did a lot of volunteer work still with villages, and I like that where businesses can do that. But I love businesses.
So practical, accessible, you were giving them the tools to take advantage of opportunities that might become available to them.
Yeah, yeah,
Nasha, this is so interesting. I had no idea
yeah.
your
I
path,
don't talk about it. Yeah, I don't even think
but
about
it
it
also
anymore.
like helps us understand your current path too.
Yeah, it's a story pre-told in some way between nonprofit and for-profit. At some point, you decided to return to the United States. Before you tell us about your return, what happened to your business? And is your book still available? And can our listeners purchase it if they want to?
They can. They absolutely can purchase it. It is still available on Amazon. Running a business, a small business in India was much harder than I'd ever anticipated, especially
Mhm.
then. It's the early 2000s when people told me that no one will ever pay you on time. It's a true story in India, and the kind of things you have to do to get people to pay you. At that point, I just wanted to come home. So I sold parts of it to other trainers. And then for me, my legacy was really the book that I wrote that kind of compiled everything that I had learned. And for me, I put a bow on my time in India.
Do you know if any of those people who you interacted with or who you impacted, how they're doing today?
Yeah, they were really successful. They
Yeah.
still email me. I
Oh,
still get
nice.
opportunities to revise the book, but I just, my life had moved on at that point. I was doing other things and I just didn't have bandwidth.
So you came back to the United States.
Came back. I was lucky that I got into Harvard, which was a phenomenal experience going to business
Mhm.
school at Harvard. And I was really still very connected to India. I was still volunteering just online, helping young people in
Mhm.
India, rewriting their resumes, things like that. And during my time in India, I had met a group of researchers who were working for Microsoft Research, and they were looking at this project where in villages, schools usually had just one computer, and that computer would always be dominated, always by a boy. The caste system
Mm.
is alive and well in India, unfortunately. And so it was always the highest caste boy that would dominate the computer. And so these researchers thought, okay, why don't we just create a computer where there has a lot of mice? And so different people can actually interact with the same program if everyone has their own mice. And this was their idea. And so they had created this prototype. And I had been really interested. And fast forward, I was in business school. I had known the gentleman who was running Microsoft in India at that time. He had gone to Harvard himself, and he was there when I was there. He came back for a talk and told me, hey, that project that you thought was really fascinating, we're actually going to productize it at Microsoft. And what do you think about running that product as your first job out of business school and moving to Seattle?
Hey.
And I thought, how exciting. I would love to do that. Didn't know anything about product management, but I was all in. And so I moved to Seattle, got a job with Microsoft,
Hmm.
and that was my product. We launched it. It was the only education product that Microsoft ever launched. And I was at Microsoft for 5 years,
Mhm.
loved living in Seattle, made great friends, met my husband.
Wow.
Really interesting experience that set me up, I think, really well to do what I'm doing now.
And you met your husband.
And I met my husband, and we had our first child, and when we were living in Seattle. At that point, I was very excited about education and education technology, and that's where my life was. And it combined a lot of the work I was doing. It
Mhm.
was just really
Mhm.
a fascinating time. And then I started
Mhm.
my next company, Schooly, that looked at data in schools and how schools are performing and consolidating that data and providing it back to parents so they can make better decisions about what's happening in their schools, for policymakers to understand what is actually occurring in schools. So we moved to California. At that point, my husband got a job down here, and I was running that company, Schooly. And that was, really exciting experience. I was so passionate about education and technology. I'd had another child in that process. And then my third daughter, Amara, was born, and she started having seizures. And that
Hmm.
changed everything for me, right? Like absolutely everything. I was able to luckily sell the company, and I did that right when it got to be too much with caring for my daughter, having 100 seizures a day, and trying to
Yeah.
run this
Yeah.
company and having two other children under the age of 4. And so that's really what changed my entire life. And education seems like a
Mm.
far dream now that happened in another
Mm.
lifetime. And my entire life is rare disease now.
Yeah. I hope you don't mind if we ask more about your experience with Amara, with a child who started to have seizures, and
Yeah.
what that was like for her, and really what that was like for you. Got to be very challenging to be witnessing this as a mom.
It was really challenging. It's definitely changed my entire life. Yeah, she was having infantile spasms at the time. And luckily we were able to get them under control with the medication. And we got her diagnosis then a couple of months after that she had a rare neurodevelopmental genetic condition called FOXG1 syndrome, which obviously I'd never heard of. Um, that first year was an interesting journey where I was absolutely devastated. And I had two other children under the age of 4. My husband, unfortunately, had taken a really big job at that point and honestly was just not there during that time. Those are sort of my darkest days if I think about it, just I didn't even have time to kind of deal with my emotions because everything was so up in the air and there was so much going on, and just managing her and trying to figure everything out. And, I was stressed and anxious and sad and all of those things. And then I had the fortune of, one of my close friends from business school being married to your CEO, Neil Kumar, who I had a meeting with and told me that, oh, I've heard of the FOXG1 gene. And have you heard of something called gene therapy? And of course I hadn't. By the way, I hated biology in high school. It was my least favorite subject, which is so ironic. That one meeting with Neil and his wife Shruti being there and then translating everything he said, because I honestly didn't understand 95% of what he was saying to me, gave me a whole new perspective that, wow, there is actually something I can do. And I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a very optimistic person. I like to solve really challenging problems. So the second I knew that, okay, there's something I can do, it gave me a lot of hope. And, it could be a coping mechanism, very likely, that I've turned a lot of my grief into trying to create change. That was a real turning point for me to say, okay, I have a choice. I can either be a victim of my circumstance, sit and cry and all of those things, or I can just take this as a blessing. My daughter is so beautiful. I can see what I can do for her and for others. All the work I had done, it was very important for me to have a purpose. And so that's this chapter of my life that I'm living now.
So Nasha, we're very interested in how someone becomes an innovator. What you've told us so far is giving us some important clues. I guess after your career as an investment banker, you started a period of your life where you saw a need, a problem, and you set out to solve it. And you did that in terms of your work with the nonprofit with women and children. And it sounds like with Amara, that was your approach as well. It was your own daughter, very personal to you. When a member of our family becomes ill like that or develops a lifelong condition, there are many ways that we can go.
That's absolutely right. And, as I reflect in each of those moments, I remember people telling me, but you don't have a background in this, how will you do it? So I remember when I started the company in India, people were telling me, but you don't have a background in training. Like, how are you going to get companies to hire you? You have no background in this. Then when I started writing the book, you don't have a background in linguistics. How are you going to do that? When I joined Microsoft, people told me, you've never created a tech product. How are you going to be a product manager? And, I've never let that stop me. It's actually much more of a challenge that I can learn. I can read. I read a lot. And I talk to a lot of people. I never pretend to know what I don't know. I want to learn as much as I can. And I think it was the same thing here where, gosh, develop a drug. And again, obviously I don't know how to do that, but I thought, okay, well, someone else has done it, so I can possibly learn from them. And so I think that's been the continuous theme. And I really, really like a good challenge. So it was very in line with who I was.
It was an intellectual challenge, but it's a personal challenge too, which is even more motivating.
It's more motivating than anything I've ever experienced. And I'd always been purpose driven. Ever since I read that book about the woman who was at the Human Rights Watch, I knew that I had to have purpose in my life. I had to for me to succeed. And I'd always looked at different ways to get purpose, but now it's so clear. I just could not imagine doing anything else.
I'm going to guess that Coco Chanel didn't know that much about perfume when she got started.
No, she didn't. And she started making hats. Her story is very funny.
I bring up Coco Chanel. You mentioned her first as a model, that you read her autobiography, and here's someone who really made something that didn't exist before.
Exactly.
As you and Mandy have just said, this was really a very personal challenge and your motivation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And and I don't want to jump the gun, but even with what we're doing now within the foundation I run and the company,
Hmm.
so many times people have said, because we're developing our own drug, and so many people have said, "Oh, foundation can't do that. You can't go all the way to an approval." And I again am like,
Hmm.
says who? Says who?
How did
Possible.
you go from being one person, highly motivated with a goal in mind, to forming an organization?
Yeah, it's not about me. It is truly about the team that
Hmm.
I've been able to form. I was so lucky very early in my journey to meet Nicole Johnson, who's my co-founder in the
Hmm.
foundation. I met her, through Facebook, as we all do, and when you're in a rare disease situation. She struck me as a very positive person, and her and I were able to form this foundation and get people excited about what we were trying to create. I've had a series of very lucky events in this unlucky situation. One is that my daughter's genetic counselor at Stanford, Ellie Brimble, I began asking her questions and she began writing back to me with answers. And we began a really beautiful relationship. And I years later found out that Amara was the first child she ever gave a diagnosis to.
Mm.
And so with Ellie and with Nicole, we started the foundation. And what Ellie and I did first was just uncover everything that had ever been written on the FOXG1 gene, reach out to all the authors to say, hey, if we gave you money, what would you do? I mean, that's literally how we started. And then we began piecing through what we needed. And
Mm.
again, having Neil's mentorship really helped me understand, okay, what do we need to build in order to create a therapy?
Mm.
And so we started that journey. I put a plan together. And with that plan, we call it the path to a cure. What is our path? And then I took that path to a cure and I talked to other parents to get them excited that we have a plan. Now just let's start raising money.
Mhm.
And that's what we did to raise our first $1 million. And we have at that time, FOXG1, gosh, there must have been about 400 patients or families that we even knew of in the world. And so to raise that kind of money with such a small population was a big deal. So it was really just having a vision and then getting proposals out. And I've learned a lot in that process. Now, when I advise others, I would never go through the same process as I went through. But at that point, you don't know what you don't know. We took this process of giving grants to a lot of different academic scientists and et cetera, et cetera. We've gotten much smarter along the process, but that's how we got going. But
Wow.
it's not, it's so much about the team that we built. Even now we have two parents that are neuroscientists who run our main lab, Jay and Sue Lee. We have Ryan Phillips, who's our CFO. We have Brianna Fleming, who does all our social media. It's really the team. You cannot achieve great things by yourself. And I think that's something that I didn't know earlier on. I had done a lot of things on my own and I'd only achieved things to a certain level. It is really about all of us working together. I just think you have to know how to work in a team and bring people along with you. So where we are today is because of everyone's contributions.
Amazing.
That is memorable, is that you cannot achieve great things on your own. And really, what an
Mhm.
important lesson, since up until then, you had achieved a lot on your own. But I guess you were up against something,
Much bigger.
yeah, not something that one person could do
Mhm.
on her own.
Exactly.
How did you find those people? Like, how did you put together this magical team that you felt could do this important work on behalf of your daughter in this community?
So, I do think I have good intuition on people. And, meeting Nicole, I knew she was a special person. And she was an entrepreneur herself, very talented person, very creative. And then same with Ellie. Ellie had never done anything like this before, but I could tell that she was brilliant and she was passionate. I always think those are the two most important things. It's not really that you've done it before. And so I started to pull together people that I just felt were very, very good and could learn things. Same with Sue and Jay. They're very basic scientists and they'd never developed a drug, but they had the passion and they were very smart. So pulling them in. And then it's really creating this cohesion and love between our team members that we're a family and we're doing this together, right? So, and for such a personal reason, you need that. Even now, we have hired someone from biopharma, Dr. Gay Ailon, who is running our gene therapy program. And people always ask me, like, how did you get him? How did you get him from pharma to take this job and do this with you? And I think it's because our team it's like a mission and we're all so good at our own personal the things that we do. So I think I've been lucky, but also pulling people in and being there for them and knowing that, we're all working towards a cause. We're all working hard. I never ask anyone to do something I wouldn't do myself, and we're going forward.
Nasha, you began in the foundation providing funding to academic researchers. You literally were looking for people who could do this research. But subsequently, the foundation has really shifted to engage in the development of potential treatments. How did you make that shift? And again, this is something that many of us would think would be beyond us.
Yeah. So, what I started looking at is, what is drug development like today? Again, I read a lot, I talk to a lot of people. And what I quickly learned is that drug development today is all about creating drugs that can affect the largest number of people. And the manufacturing processes behind it are very much tethered to that. And if we were trying to create a drug for a small amount of people, a precise drug, we could not follow the same manufacturing processes. I also found, in speaking to many biotech and pharma companies, that there was too many silos in the process. And I am a big believer in something that you see a lot in technology, which is the best consumer products are created when you have design, product, and engineering working together. Yeah. Anytime you see too much outsourcing, you start to pull away from a good consumer experience, and you also have a very inefficient process. So, and that's something that I wasn't seeing when I was speaking to many biotech and pharma companies. So I started to look at, what can we do differently? I saw data as a big problem, and this is where I brought in my previous experiences. And I'm also a co-founder at Citizen, which is a health tech startup. And a big part of this was, like the way we collect data on patients, which is such a big part of drug development, is so archaic. And when I talked to people, it was just sort of, well, this is the way it has been done. We have to work with academic medical centers. Patients have to go in for these routine checks. And I couldn't understand why we had to do that when it wasn't working. Many drugs fail not because of the biology, but because you pick the wrong endpoint. You don't understand the patient population. You cannot recruit for your clinical trial. I mean, how pathetic is that, where you have a drug that works and you can't fill your trial, right? You start to unravel this, and it all comes down to, you have to understand the whole patient really closely if you're going to build a drug that really works for them. And I wasn't seeing a lot of that in healthcare. Citizen thought of an entire new way to collect data on patients. And we work with a lot of pharma companies. But again, when I work with pharma, a lot of pushback I get is, well, the FDA won't approve that. How do you know? Have you actually presented a logical plan to the agency, and have they said no? You get a lot of that. So us as a foundation, we are taking more risks. We are using really innovative approaches with how we collect data, how we're doing different things in our process. We have gotten this far. We've had a really successful pre-IND meeting with the FDA. We hope to submit our IND in November and start our clinical trials early next year. And so it's taken us less than 8 years. That's because also I learned so much in the process that I would never do again. Like, I would never give grants out to a whole bunch of academics and see what happens. I would never do that again. I would make it much more consolidated. And we've been able to create our own lab actually at University at Buffalo to just make things much more efficient. So we are trying to prove people who don't think you can do things in different ways wrong, and take a gene therapy that we hope is going to be very effective into the clinic and also get to an approval.
I think what we would be interested in learning more about now is Citizen and how that's helping the broader rare disease community.
Yeah, so we do hope that everything we do is going to help everybody else. And overall, I am really passionate about this area that I call the missing middle. Actually was coined by Sunitha Malipati. I have to give her credit for that, from the Buffalo Foundation. But right now, when you think about how drugs are developed, we all know this 10,000 rare disease number. But what's interesting is that the majority of those rare diseases actually fall under about 1,000 patients. And if you have more than 1,000 patients, you have a lucrative business. You can actually build something that works. And if you have less than about 10 patients, there's an N of 1 pathway. Not that that's easy by any means, but there's a different regulatory pathway for that. Everything in between is this missing middle, where we're not lucrative enough for pharma and we can't really take this N of 1 pathway. And so what do we do? And that is where the majority of rare diseases fall, actually. And that's where FOXG1 falls, and that's what we're trying to solve for. We know that we have to be more efficient. It cannot cost between $100 to $150 million to develop a drug for these populations. So we are really going out of our way to see how can we bring this cost down. Our goal is to get all the way to approval within $22 million. If we could do that, even with all the mistakes we've made, which have been plenty, then you could look at, all right, maybe in 15 million, we could actually develop a genetic therapy. And then we have something that is totally viable and we've created a new market. That's what we want to get to. Again, I started Citizen when I started looking at how dysfunctional it was to collect patient data today. It is not possible when you have a patient population between 300 to 600, folks in America, where the majority of these patients are very sick, to expect them to be able to visit an academic center every 6 months to a year to collect data over a 10-year period, 5 to 10-year period. It is not possible. You will not get enough patients. They will drop out in between. You will not get a rich natural history study. You will not select the right endpoints, and no one will invest in your drug and in your program. So we really looked at what can we collect within what a patient goes through every single day. One thing we go through is visiting our doctors. We are in and out of ER all the time. We are visiting doctors whether we want to or not, because if we don't, we can't get our therapies approved for our children. We have to get drugs prescribed for our children. So we're in and out of the medical system. So the first thing Citizen has focused on is collecting the entirety of the medical record, which, by the way, I double dog dare you to go try to collect your entire medical record and see how hard it is. It is so difficult.
Impossible.
It's impossible. And then imagine if you're sick and you've got like so much data, MRI images, EEG tracings. So the first thing Citizen did was really collect the entirety of that record and figure out how we do it and how we do it efficiently. And then it's how do we extract data from those medical records and normalize and harmonize that data to actually create a longitudinal natural history study. That's how we started. Now we're adding on other layers of what patients are going through. And that's an entire new exciting chapter of Citizen. We've just launched our first AI advocate. And oh my gosh, Mandy, I can go on and on. I mean, there's so much here to talk about.
I know. If you just launched this new AI advocate, what is the goal of that? And what are you hoping to see for the future?
One of the things we learned at Citizen is our whole motto was working with patient advocacy groups and saying, hey, let's get your patients onboarded. Super short onboarding process, 5 minutes. We're going to collect all their medical records and it's for research. What we have learned is the majority of patients don't care about research. They're just trying to get through their day-to-day. Their day-to-day is so hard. And the big shift at Citizen is that we are building a consumer health company that has never existed before. Right now, everything is very clinical. People, even the word patient is such a pathetic word, right? Just be patient, just wait for someone to do something for you. We are trying to change that on its head. And we are building an entire consumer suite of products that helps patients day to day. Because if we do that, patients are going to be engaged, and then we'll be able to collect much more data that will help them in research and help develop drugs faster. And so our first product that we've launched is AI Advocate, where you can chat with your medical records. So now when Amara's IEP is coming up for her school, I have to answer all these questions. I've just gone to our AI Advocate tool. I've said, please give me a summary of all of Amara's developmental milestones since birth. I've got everything in a table. When I'm in ER, the last time I was in ER, I get asked the same question each time. What medications has she been on? Instead of raking my head, I just say, hey, I went to my app, give me Amara's medication history and focus on epilepsy meds. I got an entire table with dose, frequency, who prescribed it, etc. So that's the first product that we've launched. We have a whole array of other products that are coming up to make patients' lives much easier. What we will end up getting to is multiplayer mode, where you could start asking questions de-identified of the community's medical records. So you can imagine, I could say, hey, Amara's having a new type of symptom. Please tell me, what other kids who have FOXG1 syndrome, are they experiencing a similar symptom? What medications are they taking? What adverse effects do they have? And what my dream is for Citizen is that I get a ping one day in my Citizen app saying, hey, we've noticed that kids who are similar to Amara are all seeing a GI specialist. Amara has all of these symptoms, yet she's not seeing that specialist. Go to your Citizen account. There's a pre-populated letter that describes why she needs to see a GI specialist. go ahead and send that to your pediatrician to get a referral. Oh, and by the way, here are 3 doctors that we really highly recommend she gets referred to that are in your insurance, in your network. What we want to get to is actually using data to help patients, but not giving a chart to a family and saying, hey, figure it out. But actually, we're using data to tell you what you're not doing. What are we missing? And then actually giving us the tools to help us get there. That's what families need.
Mhm.
And by doing
Yeah.
that, we'll be able to get many more patients and then build much richer natural history studies that lead to better drugs.
In the process, you're offering something to the families themselves as a tool to be able to pull together information that they're going to need, put something into it, and they get something out of it. It's really
Exactly. It's,
wonderful.
we want to bring patients along this journey. And this has very much impacted the way I think about the foundation, where when we started, it was all about a cure.
Yeah.
What I realized in the process, in my own experience, is the day to day is hard. We have to support each other day to day.
Yeah.
And we've evolved as a foundation, and now we do so much to support our families. Cure is a loaded word. Even if Amara gets a gene therapy treatment, she's still going to have a lot of things going on.
Mhm.
She's still always
Mhm.
going to have FOXG1 syndrome. And I need help in how to manage that, even with a cure.
Nasha, thank you so much for your description of citizen health. I feel like I'm going to sign up as soon as we get off the podcast.
We're only open for rare disease families right now, but
Well, you may not know with whom you're speaking in that case. So
oh, really? Okay.
yes,
All 3 of us have
yeah, yep,
something.
Really? Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
So after Amara was born and began to have seizures, you started to think about how you could solve this problem. And what you've told us so far is that you've learned that you could do things that you didn't know how to do before, but you could do them best when you do them with other people. And that you're not going to take no for an answer. Just I think of your example about someone saying FDA is not going to approve that. You'll say, well, who says? You had a willingness to do things differently, and you had the passion to do something for Amara and for other kids. What I'd like to know is what you would advise the next parent whose child is diagnosed with a rare disease for which there is no organization. What should be their first steps to follow a similar path that you have followed?
Yeah.
I think that's important, is that we all have skills that we can bring to the table, and it's to really exploit your skills. I was really lucky that I was able to look at people like Monica Conrads from the Rett Syndrome Research Trust, right? Or Alison Barrett from FemFast for Angelman, and see how they did things and learn from them. So I would say the first thing is just learn as much as you possibly can. I actually did another podcast with Mike Raglia, who runs a SINGAP research fund, with Effie Parks, and we listed what we call, it was going to be the 10 commandments, but it ended up being 12, on these are the steps you should do as a newly diagnosed parent who wants to start an advocacy group and search for a cure. That's not everyone. You don't have to do that. If you want to, though, if you want to lean in and do that, there is a pathway that you could take. So we've really outlined that, and it really does come down to 3 categories. 1, understand the biology. You need to be the expert at the biology of your disease. When I meet parents and I say, hey, what chromosome is your gene on? And they say, I don't know. I tell them, you need to know that. You need to know everything about your gene and your condition. The second is understand your patient community. And for that, you need to organize your patients. Now you could join Citizen, but you need to get it together, right? You need to get your patients on a platform where you're collecting their data and you're understanding them. And the third is, based on your gene, can you upregulate it? Can you downregulate it? What do you need to do? And focus on drug development. Don't do anything else. I see a lot of groups spending a lot of money and doing a lot of different things. But if you can be a little bit more focused on what do I need to do for this gene, and then just focus on that drug development. And then the last thing is you need to fundraise. That's the elephant in the room no one likes to talk about. All of this is very expensive. We have raised $13 million to date. It has almost killed us. It is so hard to raise money as a foundation with such a small patient population. You have to figure out how to fundraise. So I hope things change in the future where there are more government grants or other grants available. But it's a lot. The other thing I would tell a new parent is take it day by day. Day by day, what can you accomplish? What can you accomplish day by day? It's a marathon. You got to take care of yourself as well. You have to be positive. That's my last advice.
It's good advice. No, I'm just thinking that Nasha, you are the Coco Chanel of rare disease. Right? You are an innovator, truly,
Oh,
though.
I've been waiting my whole life to be compared to Coco. Thank you, Mandy.
And you've done this without liking biology one bit.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking about the advice
Not at all. Don't like it at all.
for those of us who flunked biology. Apparently, you can learn what you didn't know.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing your advice with us.
Yes. And everyone will talk to you as a parent. So, you can ask for a lot of advice.
I'd like to selfishly just ask you for an update on Amara in this. So
Yeah, she's doing good. She was doing bad once again, but we've got her on a new seizure regimen and she's doing okay. I am really hopeful for our gene therapy, honestly. And it's always a hard decision because there are new capsids coming out. Things are going to get much better, in a decade. But we have something today that I think is really going to work. And I'm hoping that makes a big impact for her.
Well, we are hopeful with you.
Thank you.
Well, we're so grateful for your time and for sharing your story.
Of course. It was so fun to talk about. I haven't thought about that part of my life in so long.
We'll try to find your podcast with Mike and Effie and link to it because I think that sounds great.
Yeah, it's really great. It's called The 12 Commandments. If you look it up, it's there. It's her most listened to podcast.
Oh, great. So is it on Once Upon a Gene?
Once Upon a Gene, yeah.
Oh, okay. And we've had Effie on the On Rare podcast also. So
she's phenomenal.
We quote her all the time, you have to find your people. So
you got to find your cohort and you help each other along the way.
I loved all about this podcast. I thought it was fun to hear Nasha's personal story, but it was especially inspiring how she took all of her learnings through the course of her life and is serving what's best for her daughter, what's best for her daughter's rare community, but also the broader rare disease community. She is transforming how we're thinking and doing, all in the face of a lot of obstacles. How many people told her, you don't know about linguistics, so don't write a book. You don't know about training young women in India. You don't know how to build programming for Microsoft. You don't know how to make a drug for a rare disease population, but every time Nasha found a way. And she gives a lot of credit to the teams that she's built over the years.
And Nasha says at one point that, she was challenged, well, you don't know how to do this, you've never done it. And she says, well, I can learn and I can read. And that's another lesson that all of us can remember is that we may not have experience doing something, but we can learn how to do it. Maybe that's what makes the difference is that an innovator is willing to take the time to learn what they didn't know before in order to accomplish something that hasn't been done before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I am always curious, what is it that helps someone move from one experience to another? And I think she said, I like a good challenge. What fuels this for someone who becomes an innovator? Well, I wrote this down because I was so moved by it. She said, I turned a lot of my grief into trying to create change.
Yeah, she used her challenges to innovate and create change.
Maybe all of us can use what we've learned in our lives to make a difference for our family, ourselves, our community. And that's exactly what Nasha has done.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Nasha. And thank you to our exceptional producer, Amy Brooks. For more information about FOXG1, visit the FOXG1 Research Foundation. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about citizen health, check them out online as well. If you'd like this podcast, please subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, write us on onrare@bridgebio.com. Thanks again for being with us today, and join us for our next conversation with another On Rare Innovator.